So as he indicated, I'm a lecturer at the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, and I'm very happy to be leading today's guest lecture, which happens to be the third one in our Acclimatis course series. I hope to have a very good engagement with all of you from wherever you are connecting from the African continent. So before I start, let me welcome participants from Kenyatta University. I want to believe they are here. Those from Kenyatta University in Kenya. We have University for Development Studies in Ghana. We have the Kisii University in Kenya. You are most welcome. I'm very happy to be here with you today. From the University of Ghana in Ghana, we have Utrecht University from the Netherlands. University of Nairobi in Kenya. We have the Emmanuel Alayande University of Education in Nigeria. We have a University of Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. The University of Zambia, joining us all the way from Zambia. And then we have Kenya Methodist University. I want to believe you are also here. And finally, we have those from the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, where I'm also connecting from Ghana. So you are all welcome to this afternoon's lecture. And today, we are going to be talking about addressing climate change through mitigation and adaptation. One thing I want us to understand is that irrespective of wherever it is that we are coming from, climate change is everywhere. And climate change affects our lives in different ways. It affects our farms. You see how agriculture is, especially in our part of the world. Climate change is affecting the way farming is being done. And because of climate change, we are unable to produce food in abundance as we expect. And for that matter, the kind of output that we expect is not what we always get. It affects, talking about agriculture, it affects both plants and animals, whether you are into animal production or you are into crop production. The climate situation has never been the same. It keeps changing day in and day out. We are experiencing very high temperatures that are not favorable for the growth of our crops. So farmers plant the crops, and at the end of the day, they harvest, and then they are not able to get the yield that they expect. And because farmers are unable to get the required yield, that in a way also affects how the output, the very few output that is produced, is sold on the market. And because of that, at the end of the day, foodstuffs are very expensive in the market. The point I'm trying to make is that everybody, from wherever you find yourself, you also have your fair share of having affected by climate change. You may be sitting somewhere and then you think that you don't have a problem. But everybody must eat. Food is very expensive. Why is it expensive? It's expensive because farmers are unable to produce in abundance. It affects our water bodies. Weather temperatures, what happens is that the climate variables are expected to be at certain levels. If it goes below it, it's a problem. If temperature is too high, it's a problem. If it is too low, it's also a problem. Look at the way rainfall has become erratic these days. The rains come the time you don't expect the rain. The rains come the time farmers do not expect the rain. So everybody everywhere is affected by climate change. It affects our health because of the kind of high temperatures that we are experiencing these days. Certain diseases are very common. For instance, when you come to Ghana, for instance, in the northern part of the country, when the weather is becoming very warm, you see a lot of people becoming affected with cerebrospinal meningitis. This is part of the effects of climate change that we are talking about. So what are we doing today? Today, we want each and every one of us here to have a basic, whether we like it or not, climate change is here with us. So we want each and every one of us here to have a basic knowledge of what we are currently experiencing, what is happening to our temperature variable, what is happening to rainfall, what is happening to wind. How can we, why is it that now the rains are coming at a time that we do not expect? Why is the weather becoming too warm? Why are we experiencing very high temperatures? How can we mitigate these things that we are experiencing such that we are able to work towards ensuring that at the end of the day, the temperature is not going to be warm as we expect? So we are going to be looking at climate change mitigation. And basically, in talking about mitigation, we first want to look at what are some of the causes of climate change and how can we reduce some of these causes so that climate change doesn't occur at all. And when climate change has also occurred, how can we live with it? That is the adaptation aspect. So mitigation comes before the climate change. And then the adaptation also, we talk about adaptation when climate change has already occurred, and then we still have to find a way of adapting to the situation or working with it. From wherever you are connecting from and then listening to me this afternoon, I want you to understand that you are the future leaders of Africa. You are the future leaders. What the kind of decisions that you take today as a student will mean a lot to the world. So climate action starts from you. What can you do in your small way to also contribute to reducing climate change? Look at the way our cities are flooded today. I am currently speaking to you from Ghana, and in our capital city, in our capital city of Accra, anytime the weather is cloudy, then the people living in this city will be thinking, what is going to happen? Because our city is always flooded, because people have just built houses anyhow. People are paving their houses the way it's not supposed to be paved. So when it rains, water is unable to percolate, you see, and then move through the pavements. And this leads to a lot of runoff. So what can we do? And that is why everybody, whoever is participating in this course, is also going to undertake a project. You think about a climate change problem, and then what can you do in your small way so that at the end of the day, your project can propose some solutions as to how we can address some of these. Now, look at this particular graph.
Before we proceed to the next slide, maybe we can enter in presenter mode. The slides are not in presenter mode.
Okay, they are not, okay, all
Yeah.
right. I also just thought of it and then, yeah, what a coincidence.
The icon next to undo, Yeah.
I hope it's better now.
Yeah, it's good now. Thank you.
Good. Great. Okay. So look at, let's try to understand what climate change is all is about. Basically, in talking about climate change, we are talking about long-term changes in temperature, rainfall, wind patterns, and of course, all the other weather variables that we know, largely caused by what? Human activities, likely burning of fossil fuels. So we are talking about how these variables that I've mentioned change over time. And research has shown that over the years, these variables have worsened. And that is why we need to be very, very careful. Otherwise, in the next 20 to 50 years, things will be very bad. The weather is becoming warmer and warmer. Temperature keeps increasing. So if you look at this particular graph, this graph is depicting how temperature has changed from the 1900s all the way up to the year 2023. And if you look at the nature of the graph, you realize that we have different, you can see different uh, waveforms within the graph. This is because the graph was drawn with data that was collected from different places. Data collected in the United States, data collected from Europe, data collected from Japan, data collected from different parts of the world were used in drawing the graph. And what we observed is that for all the different data sets that were used, you realize that there's an upward trend in temperature. So moving all the way from the 1900s all the way up to now, you realize that there has been an upward trend in temperature. And where is this climate change coming from? It's basically, in most cases, as a result of the burning of fossil fuels. So when we talk about fossil fuels, we are talking about fuel that is uh, obtained after a very long time decomposition of plant and animal sources. And this has been the source of the petrol, the diesel that we use. Any machine that is using petrol or diesel, at the end of the day, when you move on our roads, you, you see sometimes cars are releasing obnoxious gases onto the atmosphere. These smokes contain greenhouse gases. And these greenhouse gases are able to trap, heat. And that actually contributes to the global warming. So climate change is basically as a result of what? Human activities. And when I talk about human activities, I'm talking about burning of fossil fuels by driving cars, by using machines. Any machine that uses fuel, that uses petrol, contributes to climate change. So is it possible that instead of using petrol or using uh, any using petrol or diesel or any fossil fuel, even uh, the liquid petroleum gas we use at home in cooking, they all contribute to climate change because they are all fractions of petroleum. They are all obtained as a result of what? Uh, Fractional distillation of crude oil. So that at the end of the day, we are able to get our petrol and what have you. All these things contribute to climate change. So this graph is just an example. I'm just using temperature as an example that temperature keeps what? Increasing. So what you and I have to do today is to ask ourselves, what can we do to be able to bring this climate change down so that temperature will come back to uh, the normal region. Now, the question is, you and I, why should Africa care about climate change? Climate change leads to droughts, floods, heat waves, and poor harvest. And these are things that we see in Africa on a daily basis. It increases poverty and makes life harder for farmers, fishers, and communities. And this is why Africans should be concerned about climate change. The reason is that in Africa, most people rely on primary production. Many people are either farmers, they are fishermen, you see, and farmers rely so much on rain. If a farmer plants a crop and at the end of the day, the plant doesn't do well, the farmer is going to lose. The farmer is going to be poor. There's going to be poverty in the system. If it rains too much, if it rains and then the rains comes with so many huge winds, that is going to affect the crops because some crops are susceptible to what? Very high winds. If you take a plant like a plantain, when it is very windy, at the end of the day, all of them fall onto the ground, and that is going to affect the farmer. So because people living in Africa rely so much on agriculture, fishing, and other primary activities, it is very important we are cautious of what climate change is doing to us. Climate change causes drought. If it is not raining, the crops will not do well. And here in Africa, because most farmers in Africa are poor, they can also afford irrigation equipment. And because of that, most agricultural activities in our part of the world are normally rain-fed. And that is why we need to work towards ensuring that we have rains all the time. Look at the way our cities in Africa keep flooding. I use Accra as an example. As soon as the weather becomes cloudy, then people will start wandering because if you don't take care, the time you realize a whole room, a whole house, a whole compound house is flooded with what? Water. Look at the heat waves causing so many diseases and uncomfort. So this is the reason why we need to care and start thinking about how we can mitigate climate change and how we can also adapt to climate change. In fact, according to the World Meteorological Organization, by the year 2030, it is estimated that up to about 118 million extremely poor people. When I talk about extremely poor people, I'm talking about those who are living below $2 a day. These people are estimated to be exposed to drought, floods, extreme heat. That is if we are not able to take steps to mitigate climate change. And this is going to place additional burden on poverty alleviation efforts. Already in Africa and some parts of Asia, a lot of efforts are being put in place to alleviate poverty. So if we don't find a way, knowing very well that these people living in these parts of the world rely solely on primary activities that are climate dependent, if we don't find a way of mitigating climate change or helping them adapt to climate change, then that is also going to worsen our struggle for working towards alleviating poverty. So if you look at this particular graph that you currently see on the slide, you see that flood has been a very serious climate change effect, affecting so many cities in Africa. Sometimes so many households are displaced because of floods. And where are these floods coming from? The reason is that in recent times, we are experiencing heavy rains, and these heavy rains flood the city, and then they flood houses and all that. Closely followed by flood is drought. In Ghana here, for instance, I remember 2 years ago, our farmers in the northern part of the country did not get the kind of rains that they needed. And because of that, most of the plants that they planted did not do well. And because of that, the finance minister at the time, I remember, had to go into the contingency fund to be able to get some money to cushion these farmers. Even this money that came from the finance ministry, how much was it? And these farmers are also poor. They cannot afford irrigation equipment. And that is where you and I, who now find ourselves in our universities, what can we do in our small way, in our homes, from wherever is it that we are coming from? I want to believe that everybody has seen the effects of climate change. What can we do to be able to mitigate it or help people adapt to climate change? We've been talking about mitigation and adaptation. They look very much alike. But what is mitigation? Mitigation means reducing or stopping the things that cause climate change. So because you can mitigate, you must know the causes of climate change and then work towards reducing those things. And once you are able to reduce those things, you end up, reducing climate change. So greenhouse gases emissions. I was talking about the cars that ply our roads. Over 99% of the cars that ply our roads use fossil fuels. They use petrol, they use diesel. And in the course of combustion, they release so many obnoxious gases like carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And these carbon dioxide are able to trap warm air. And that actually contributes to this climate change. So when I talk about the greenhouse gases, I'm talking about carbon dioxide, I'm talking about methane, I'm talking about nitrous oxide, fluorinated gases. These gases are normally released as a result of human activities, as a result of felling trees. The reason is that trees are able to absorb these greenhouse gases. So if you are felling them and then you are causing deforestation, then you are depriving the ecosystem of its ability to be able to absorb these gases. Factories, mining, and construction firms also release these gases into the atmosphere. So they all contribute to climate change. So in talking about climate change, just think of it like stopping the fire before it burns down the house. The first thing for you to know is for you to understand what really causes climate change, or what are the causes of climate change, and how can we stop the causes. Once you are stopping the causes of climate change, then you are mitigating. So you work towards a situation whereby we don't have climate change at all. So mitigation is more or less a preventive measure. Now, how can we mitigate climate change? I just told you that you should understand what the causes are, and then how you can stop these causes. Now, one way we can mitigate climate change is planting more trees, either afforestation or reforestation. If we are talking about afforestation, then it means that we are planting new forest. We are trying to plant trees at places where originally trees were not growing there. So when you are doing that, then when you are doing that, then you are contributing to mitigating what climate change. The reason is that these trees are able to absorb major greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide. So we talk about agroforestry. These days, we are preaching when we talk about agroforestry, we are talking about growing crops and then planting trees at the same time. This is very common, especially in cocoa production. Away from afforestation and reforestation, you can also resort to using what we call renewable energy. So when we talk about renewable energy, we are talking about energy that doesn't rely on fossil fuels. When I talk about fossil fuels, I'm talking about using machines that rely on petrol, diesel, and other things. So is it possible you can resort to using other forms of energy without using petrol, without using diesel? One way is by using solar energy, by using solar panels. The reason is that solar panels rely on what? The sun's energy. They are able to convert the sun's energy into electrical energy to power our homes. Can we also resort to using wind turbines, where we are able to use wind energy? We are able to convert wind energy into electrical energy. Can you also use what we call bioenergy, where you are using electricity that is generated from plant and animal sources? For instance, instead of using LPG or liquefied petroleum gas, is it possible you can use what we call biogas? That is an example of bioenergy obtained from plant and animal sources. These things that I've mentioned actually reduce the need for fossil fuels. So this is how you can mitigate climate change. That is one way you can mitigate climate change. Another way you can also mitigate climate change is by energy efficiency, by using less energy in our homes, in our schools, and in businesses. An example is using energy-saving bulbs and appliances. You see, these days we have so many energy-saving bulbs in the system as compared to those we were using previously. Is it possible we can resort? So the point I'm trying to make is that from wherever is it that each and every one of us finds ourselves, if we're going out there to go and buy a bulb to come and put in your room, look for the one that is energy saving, that is not going to consume a lot of energy. The reason is that in most parts of Africa, our source of electricity is not renewable. Our source of electricity is from fossil fuels. For instance, when you come to Ghana, for instance, we get our electricity from hydroelectric power sources. Now, these hydroelectric power sources are powered by machines that are fossil fuel dependent. So if we are not using what do you call it, an energy saving bulb, and then you are using a bulb that is consuming a lot of energy, that means once we are taking a lot of energy, then it means we will need more petrol to power our hydroelectric power source. And that is the reason why even when we are building our houses these days, you build the house in such a way that there are enough windows such that during the daytime, you wouldn't have to, there will be no need for you to put your light on. When you know there are enough windows in the room, and then you can see everywhere in the room, there is no need putting the light on, because anytime you put the light on, you are also contributing to climate change. Because that means that at the end of the day, you'll be using a lot of energy in your home. Even in our schools, sometimes the way we behave, you will see students learning in a room, they have the fan on, they have the bulbs on. When they are leaving, they leave everything there. Sometimes when I'm leaving, when I'm going home and then I'm leaving my office, you go down there and then you realize that the fans are on, the lights are on, places that students were sitting and then they were learning. There is nobody in the room. And then the fans are on, the lights are on. From today onwards, if this has been the habit of any of us, let us stop it. And once you stop it, you are contributing to mitigating climate change. One other thing we can also do is by, reducing waste. Instead of sending a lot of waste in our landfills, our refuse dumps, where we dump our refuse, let's think about how we can possibly recycle them. Is it possible we can recycle some of the waste into usable materials? The reason is that if we take all these things to our landfills or our refuse dump, at the end of the day, they are going to be burnt. And in the course of burning, greenhouse gases are what? Emitted. So these are some of the things that we can do to mitigate climate change. We are talking about mitigation. We are also talking about adaptation. So as I said earlier on, mitigation is what? A preventive measure. What about adaptation? Adaptation means adjusting our lives and practices to protect ourselves from the effects of climate change that are already happening. So here uh, we are just telling ourselves that we are aware that climate change is happening. We are aware that climate change is just a minute, and somebody is calling my. All right, sorry about the interruption. So when we talk about adaptation, we are basically talking about trying to accept the fact that whether we like it or not, climate change is already happening. So what can we do to still be able to live with climate change? That is adaptation. So think of it like building a stronger house to withstand the storm. So you know that the storm will already come. The storm is going to come all right. You see, whether you like it or not, the storm is going to come. But what can you do so that when the storm comes, it doesn't collapse your house? This is how you should think about adaptation. So, in talking about adaptation, we are accepting the fact that climate change is already happening and is going to even worsen. So, if it does, how are we still going to actually live with it? So, and remember, as I told you, climate change affects so many things. It affects agriculture, it affects our housing, our economy, and a whole lot of things. So one of the things we can do, maybe if I may have to veer into agriculture, is the use of climate smart agricultural practices. I think I talked about the fact that Africans have to be concerned about climate change because most people in Africa rely on primary activities like what? Agriculture. And the question is, what can we do? How can we still do our agriculture, even in the presence of climate change? So one of them has to do with doing what we call conservation agriculture. And when we talk about conservation agriculture, we are talking about how we can conserve our soils. Is it possible we can do our agriculture under minimum or little no what tillage? So when I talk about minimum or little tillage, trying to do your agriculture without tilling the land, without breaking the soil, but maintaining the mulch, making sure that the soil is covered with what? Leaves and what have you. And mulching actually, cools, is able to cool the soil and give the soil its natural state. Is it possible we can embark on what we call crop rotation, where maybe you plant legumes today, followed by maize, so that the legumes that was planted previously is able to provide some nitrogen for the maize that is now going to be planted. Is it possible we can also do intercropping, where you are able to plant different crops at the same time on the same piece of land? So that is a conservation agriculture. I've already talked about agroforestry, where you are able to grow crops and at the same time, plant trees at the same time, so that these trees are able to absorb carbon dioxide uh, in the atmosphere. Now, one other way we can also adapt to climate change is by improving water management. You see, I was talking about the issue of drought. How can we adapt to drought, whether we like it or not? The climate change is coming all right, and drought is already with us. Drought is a period of no rains, the place is becoming dried, and all that. We can use irrigation so that when you are now going to plant your maize, knowing very well that it's likely that the rains may not come the way you expect. If you have the resources, then you need to work towards providing irrigation so that in the unlikely event of the rains not coming, you know that the irrigation can serve as a buffer. Or can you also, in periods when it is also raining heavily, can we find a way of harvesting the rain and then storing them in reservoirs so that during times when it is not raining, we can use this water to also water our crops. One other thing we can also adapt to climate change is that whether we like it or not, climate change has come. Can we not just be thinking about planting just any variety, but we plant what we call drought resistant and early maturing varieties? If we take a crop like maize, we have different varieties of maize. Some of them are drought resistant. In other words, they are able to withstand what? Drought. Even when it doesn't rain well, they'll still do well. Can we look for such varieties and plant instead? So that when drought comes, we will still get our yield. Can we also go in for early maturing crops? Plants that are able to mature very early so that it doesn't have to stay on the land for a very long time before you can harvest. We can also go into what we call integrated pest management. Instead of spraying chemicals, spraying pesticides to control pests, to control insects, and then whatever. Is it possible we can rather go into using what we call biological control? In talking about a biological control, we are talking about the use of predators. There are certain insects that can serve as prey or that can predate on other insect pests. The reason is that the more you use pesticides, the more you also contribute to climate change. Why is it so? Remember that this pesticide is produced in a factory, and that factory uses the factory uses fossil fuel. The factory uses petrol. So the more many people are buying, pesticides, the more many people, farmers are demanding the pesticides, the more the factory also has to produce or supply more pesticides. And by way of producing and supplying the pesticides, at the end of the day, the factory is contributing to what? Climate change. Because the factory is going to use more petrol, more diesel, producing so many obnoxious or greenhouse gases like what? Carbon dioxide. You see, we can, instead of also using so many fertilizers in our farms, we can also resort to using organic sources like compost, like using manure, using green manuring. Just like the explanation that I just gave with regards to the pesticides, the more we use fertilizers, the more we are also contributing to climate change. The reason being that once demand for fertilizer increases, that means fertilizer producing firms will also have to produce and supply a lot of fertilizers. And by supplying fertilizers, they have to, use a lot of petrol. They have to burn a lot of petrol in the course of using their factory machines, and that also contributes to climate change. We are talking about just the crops, but in agriculture, we don't only talk about the crops, we also talk about our animals. And our animals also continue to be affected with climate change. And these animals are normally affected, for instance, by heat stress. So is it possible that we can always think about rearing animals that are resistant to what? Animal diseases and what have you? Even if you have to use irrigation in your farm, don't go in for an irrigation pump that relies on petrol. Go in for an irrigation pump that is solar powered, that is going to use the sun's energy instead. Remember, we are talking about how we can adapt to climate change. One other way we can also adapt to climate change is by using early warning systems. Here we are talking about alerting farmers and communities about floods or droughts early enough so that they can act. So as a country, is it possible that we need to find a way? Is it possible an app could be developed? People can download this app onto their phone. Farmers can download this app onto their phone. And then this app is able to alert the farmers that, oh, tomorrow is going to rain heavily. Once you are privy to this, you are able to prepare ahead of what? The heavy rains that are going to come, so that it doesn't affect you. It doesn't take you unawares. Now, once you get, if you are a farmer and then you are able to get this kind of alert on your phone, then you are able to plan and then be able to know when you even have to start, planting your maize. You plant it at a time that it will meet the rains. So an ambiguous early warnings for all action plan for Africa was launched in September 2023. And the primary objective of this particular action plan was to make sure that timely and accurate information about natural hazards and impending disasters reach all segments of African society, particularly the most vulnerable. So this particular action plan was launched in September 2023. And as I said, the main reason was to ensure that before any disaster happens, communities in Africa or Africans are able to, get to know about it. Once you get to know that maybe temperature is going to go too high, then you know how to prepare yourself and then plan for it. Once you know that maybe you are going to experience drought, then that will even inform you of the kind of plant that you have to plant, so that at the end of the day, when it happens, you don't suffer that much. Now, this particular action plan that was launched in September 2024 answers the call from the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, that every person worldwide must be protected by early warning systems by the year 2027. In fact, the UN Secretary General actually first talked about this in March 2022 during the World Meteorological Day events. And then he emphasized this again in October 2025 in Switzerland, in Geneva, in 2025, that there's the need for everybody to have access to early warning systems, so that as and when some of these disasters are about happening, we are able to prepare ourselves very well before the day comes. In fact, between 1970 and then the year 2021, Africa accounted for 35% of weather, climate, and water-related fatalities. And this is the reason why you and I need to be very, very careful about what we can do in our small way, whether through advocacy or doing anything to be able to contribute to mitigating climate change. Now, whilst Africans experience these fatalities, only 40% of African population currently has access to early warning systems. And this is something that you and I need to be concerned about. Is it possible that there could be a project anywhere that is going to make early warning systems available to, people living in Africa so that we will not be affected by the effects? Another way we can also adapt to climate change is by building resilient infrastructure. Building resilient infrastructure for climate change adaptation means designing and constructing systems that can withstand, adapt to, and then recover from climate-related shocks like floods, droughts, storms, and heat waves. How do we plan our cities? How do we build our buildings? These days, people build houses, they pave their houses with, instead of using pavements that are water permeable. What I mean by pavements that are water permeable are pavements that water can pass through, so that when it rains, water can quickly percolate and then be able to get under the ground. But these days, you get to so many houses and then people are tiling even the outside ground. So it rains and then the water doesn't have a place to go. So we need to be very careful about the way we plan our cities. City authorities need to ensure that people are not just building across waterways where water is supposed to pass. So this actually applies to our roads, our buildings, our energy systems. Before we construct our roofs, it's very important we lay our gutters well so that when it rains, the water will have a place to pass. By doing this, we are working towards adapting to what? Climate change. It is very important that in order that the kind of houses that we build don't become affected by climate change, we need to ensure that these houses are very, very strong. We need to ensure that they have the required structural integrity with better drainage systems to prevent floods. It is flooding has become very common in our cities these days. That, as I told you from the beginning, for some places, for some cities in Africa, as soon as the weather gets cloudy, then people will start thinking. Because if we are not lucky, by the time the rain stops, your whole room will be engulfed with what? Water. It is also very important that we do risks and vulnerability assessment. And by talking about risks and vulnerability assessment, we are talking about sitting down and then thinking through and then trying to identify hazards. What are some of the possible negative climate change effects? Thinking about the floods, the drought, the storms, the heat waves. In fact, these have been the main effects of climate change. And then trying to understand who are the people who are normally affected by these hazards that I've mentioned. You see, who are the people who are normally affected? What can we do to support these people? This is part of the risks and vulnerability assessment. And even what are the things that are normally affected? Which infrastructures are normally affected by climate change? The heavy rains, which infrastructures are normally affected? Is it the buildings, the roads? Once we are able to think about all these things, then we are able to think about them. Which communities are normally affected by climate change? In fact, some communities are noted to be prone to the effects of climate change, especially communities along the coast. You see, normally when the sea gets overflooded, these communities, if we are not able to protect uh, our sea very well, at the end of the day, these communities get flooded. Ecosystems are affected. So that is part of the risks and vulnerability assessment. So by this risks and vulnerability assessment, we are talking about not sitting down for the problem to occur. but we sit down and think about the possible negative effects of climate change. Then we work towards adapting to them. And then we have climate resilient design and engineering. The use of climate data to project future conditions and design stronger materials. So can we go to our meteorological services department and then collect climate data, data on temperature, data on rainfall, data on wind, and then you analyze this data, analyze this data using our theories, and then making projections about what is likely going to happen. That maybe in 10 years' time, are we going to experience heavy rains? Are we going to experience high temperatures? Are we going to experience high winds? Once we are able to do this projection, then we can work towards mitigating and, of course, adapting to them by the time it comes. So that when the time comes, yes, climate change has happened, but we will still live happily. We also need nature-based solutions. So I was talking about water management, promoting natural water management using permeable pavements. Don't just say because you have a lot of money and then you can buy so many tiles. You are just tiling your house just anyhow. Think about what is likely, uh, what can be the negative effect. And then we have community engagement and capacity building. Engage local communities early in planning and incorporating traditional knowledge and empowering communities for maintenance. So an example is what we are currently doing. What we are doing right now is to empower you so that you can also go out there and then participate in the climate change advocacy. Once you are able to empower, and then when you are empowering people in communities, you don't throw away what they know already. These days, we talk about the triple helix, where we think about, we don't just, those of us in academia don't just have to sit in our rooms and then think for how certain problems should be solved down there. Instead of doing that, you rather go down to them so that it will be a bottom-up approach. You try to discuss, do some kind of focus group discussions with them, discuss, and then try to understand what they themselves were doing already so that strategically you find a way of incorporating your theories into it so that at the end of the day, you are not going to empower them using only your theories, but it's going to be a hybrid or a mix of what they know already and then what you are also bringing on board. It is also very important that government is able to develop policies that enforce risk reduction and resilience. So for instance, there should be laws in the country barring people from not building across waterways. All houses that are built across waterways should be demolished. People should be warned that if you are going to buy land, it's very important you check your site plan very well. Make sure your site plan is not against waterways. And those who flout this rule, at the end of the day, the laws of the land will have to take them on. And then once some of these things are done, it will serve as deterrent for people who now want to build, so that people don't just build haphazardly, you know. So in a nutshell, you see, when we talk about, earlier when I talk about mitigation, now I'm talking about adaptation. So mitigation is a preventive measure. Adaptation is when climate change has happened, and then you are trying to find a way of still being able to live with it. So when you put the two together, then we have what we call climate resilience. So a community or a system that is able to mitigate climate change and is also able to adapt to climate change is said to be climate what? Resilient. So mitigation stops future problems and adaptation deals with current what? Problems. Together, they build what? Resilience. The ability, and when we talk about resilience, we are talking about the ability to bounce back from climate shocks. For instance, after a heavy rain, we still come back to, we are still able to live happily. After experiencing too much temperature, we are able to come back to normalcy. So we are talking of an example here, we are talking about a farmer planting trees. So if a farmer is planting trees, the farmer is engaged in what we call climate mitigation. And then a farmer also planting what we call drought-resistant crops. When you are planting drought-resistant crops, then you are working towards adapting to what? Climate change. In fact, both are very important for sustainable what? Development. Then to you students listening to me from across the African continent, what are you supposed to do? What can you also do in your small way to also contribute to mitigating and then adapting to climate change? One thing I want you to understand, as I told you from the beginning, you are the future leaders of Africa. And that is why the decisions, the choices you make today are crucial to, fighting against climate change. So some of the things you can do is that you can plant trees in your schools or in your communities. So from wherever is it that you are listening to me from, is it possible you can form even a climate change adaptation and mitigation club in your school, in your local community? And then through what you have learned from acclimatis, is it possible you can also empower these people? That is how you can also contribute to climate change. One other thing you can also do is to work towards saving energy, using energy saving bulbs, and then switch off lights when not in use. When you are not using your fan, when you think you don't need your fan, sometimes there's nobody in the room and the lights are on, the fans are on. Let us stop it. When we leave it on, it means that house is consuming more power. And that house using more power means that the hydroelectric power station, which is powered by fossil fuels like petrol, diesel, will have to produce more power. And by also producing more power, they are also contributing to greenhouse gas emissions. You can also start or join a recycling program on campus, as I told you. Is it possible that you can, if there's a recycling club in your university, find a way of joining them. If you currently don't have one in your university, is it possible you can form one? And then in this club, you go around picking plastics on the ground. You see, finding a way of, turning waste into usable materials instead of sending the waste to a landfill or a refuse dump for them to be burnt. Because when they are burnt that way, at the end of the day, greenhouse gases like methane are released into the atmosphere. That goes to cause what? Climate change. That contributes to global warming. What you can also educate others about climate change on social media or clubs. So this is the kind of advocacy we are talking about. Wherever you find yourself these days, you don't necessarily have to advertise your things in the newspapers, on TV, on radio. Look, we have so many social media, the Facebook, the WhatsApp, the Snapchat, and what have you, Instagram, and what have you. You can use these media to also contribute your quota to helping to mitigate climate change. And then we also need to be very, very innovative. You see, especially in agriculture, can we use solar dryers? You see, eco bricks, and then what have you? So take note of this. Now, let's look at the challenges. Why is Africa struggling to mitigate climate change? Why is Africa struggling to adapt to climate change? The number one factor is what? Lack of funds for big projects. In fact, we need projects. We can reach out to so many people by using projects. So in sub-Saharan Africa, the cost of adaptation is estimated to between 30 to 50 billion United States dollars annually. This is a lot of money. And this one is about 2 to 3%, of the gross domestic product of the African continent. We need a lot of money. But because we don't have a lot of money, for instance, if we have to plant so many trees, we need a lot of money to be able to embark on this particular agenda. If we are telling people to move away from using electricity from hydroelectric power source to using solar or wind turbines, or by using bioenergy, we need energy to be able to embark. We need money to be able to embark on this project. So because we don't have enough funds as a continent, you realize that we are suffering. And then limited technology access, technologies like weather forecasting systems, early warning systems, and climate information services. I was talking about the need for early warning systems for all in Africa, so that through the early warning systems, we get to know of what likely disasters, we get to know about if temperature is going to increase. Maybe these systems are able to let you know that maybe next month, temperature is going to rise by maybe 0.5 degrees. Once you are privy to this, you are able to plan before it even happens. So we need a lot of money we need so many technologies to be able to invest in some of these early warning systems. And by so doing, at the end of the day, we will all be contributing to the climate change agenda. So we need technologies like weather forecasting systems, early warning systems, and climate information services help farmers and communities prepare for extreme weather. In fact, farmers today are really suffering because sometimes somebody plants so many acreages of land. And let's say, especially let's say for the maize farmers, maize is a crop that is water reliant. It gets to a certain point. Before it gets to the tasseling stage, you need to apply some nitrogenous fertilizer. After applying this nitrogenous fertilizer, it must rain. If it doesn't rain, you lose it. So water is very, very important for crops. And sometimes, because of climate change, previously, when there was no climate change, farmers were able to know that, the farming season starts, let's say, in March. The rains will come in March. So you know that you are going to plan your activities and then start your production in March. This year, from where I live in Ghana, in Kumasi this year, as early as January, it was raining heavily. It was raining seriously. You see, so the rains came at a time when farmers don't really need the rain. And at the time when farmers need the rain will not come. This is the climate change we are talking about. But if we have early warning systems, and then these systems are connected to our phones, so that and then we are able to get information about the weather that maybe this year the rains will start in February. Then farmers can start planning, and then they can work towards it. So we need a lot of technology. So without access to these technologies, people are often caught off guard, leading to crop failures, you see, property loss, and even loss of what? Lives. So many lives are lost because of climate change, because of the heavy rains. Sometimes cities are flooded, buildings are collapsing, and some people eventually, lose their lives. So this is these are some of the challenges that Africa is facing. Another very important challenge Africa is facing is climate injustice, being that Africa pollutes less but suffers more. If you look at the continents of the world, Africa contributes just about 4% to climate change, just less than 4% to climate change. So Africa contributes less than 4% of global greenhouse gas emissions, yet it bears disproportionately heavy impacts from climate change. Even though we living in Africa contribute less to climate change as compared to the developed world, we are heavily hit. We are heavily what? Affected. You see, why are we saying so? Africa's economies are less industrialized, rely more on agriculture and natural resource-based livelihoods, who generally produce fewer emissions. So when you look at the kind of work that we do in Africa, because we haven't industrialized our economies, industries contribute so much to climate change. And that is why we are saying that the developed world contributes so much. In Africa, we rely so much on primary activities like agriculture, which doesn't contribute that much. Meanwhile, in this same Africa, because we rely on climate change, because we rely on agriculture, if the rains don't come, then that means that at the end of the day, we are going to be poor, because people plant these crops. At the end of the day, they have to sell them to make money. What if they plant them and then it doesn't rain? And for which reason? Because it doesn't rain, instead of getting about, let's say, 10 bags from 1 acre, you end up getting about only 3 bags. And you have already invested a lot in producing in your farm. So that is going to be a disadvantage to the farmer. And because farmers are unable to, harvest more, that means that the little that they have produced, they have to take it to the market and then sell it at a very low price. So even if you are not a farmer and then you are living in a city, you end up also going to buy the food stuff at a very high price. So you see that climate change affects everybody, whether you are a farmer or you are not a farmer. At the end of the day, you are also affected by climate change, because you go to the market and then you buy the food stuff at a very high price. So you see that a large portion of Africa's population depends on rain-fed agriculture. Even slight shifts in rainfall patterns or temperature can devastate crops and livestock. And because we rely so much on agriculture, that means that you and I need to take climate change seriously, and then find a way of making sure that we are still able to live and adapt to it. Are there some opportunities for us here in Africa? Yes. By trying to work towards mitigating climate change, there are opportunities. So green jobs in renewable energy and agriculture. Example, solar panel installation technicians. You see, as Africa, or as we all work towards, or wherever is it that you are connecting from around the world, wherever, once we are all working towards mitigating climate change, or we are working towards adapting to climate change, that is also going to create jobs. For instance, in solar panel installation, if people are now resorting to, using solar energy instead of using the normal hydroelectric power source that we use as our source of electricity, that means that jobs will be created in the area of solar panel installations. And then we also have wind turbine technicians, people who are able to install wind turbines. Some jobs will also be created over there. So these are opportunities for Africa. Once we accept the fight against climate change, these are some of the jobs that can be created. We have energy auditors. We have bioenergy specialists. If you want to rely on biogas, as a source of electricity or fuel for cooking. You see, we need experts in this particular area. Then, of course, we need what we call managers. We also need finance experts. You see. And then let me indicate that if you and I really want to embark on this climate change mitigation and adaptation agenda, you can write a proposal, you can put a proposal together and then submit it to some development organizations. Now, because climate change is important, most development organizations around the world would want to fund it. So there are funds from climate organizations. For instance, you can read about, you can Google about Green Climate Fund to support African initiatives such that if you have let's say a climate change adaptation or mitigation club, and at the end of the day, the club wants to put a proposal together and then submit it for funding, you can reach out to some of these international organizations. And at the end of the day, you are able to get funds to be able to embark on your climate change agenda. So gradually, you see that Africans are creating what solutions and these solutions are geared towards what reducing climate change. I've already done some research in the area of climate change. An example is what you currently see on your slide. I did this research with one of my mentors, who is now an emeritus research fellow at International Food Policy Research Institute in Washington. So we did this work together. He is in the United States on this topic, building resilience to shocks of climate change in Ghana's cocoa production and its effect on productivity and incomes. So this is similar to what we are currently talking about. You can see this paper online. If you can just pick the topic, if you want to read it, you can download it online and then read later on. I also did this work. This was a systematic literature review, a systematic review of climate change impacts, adaptation strategies, and policy development in West Africa. It's also one of the papers that I did. And then my mentor at IFPRI, International Food Policy Research Institute in Washington in the United States, is also listed as an author in this particular paper. Of course, this one was not a research article. It was a systematic literature review. You can also find this paper on my Google Scholar, or you can just Google it out there if you want to read it. And then one of my recent studies also on the impact of use of climate information services on smallholder welfare, evidence from cashew farmers in Ghana. In my presentation, I was talking about the need for early warning systems. Once we have these early warning systems, then that means that climate information will be available. Even before the disaster happens, you have information about it, and then you are able to plan towards it. So this particular work was actually about the impact of having access to climate information and how it's able to, improve on cashew farmers' welfare. So in conclusion, what I want to tell you is that climate change is real. And I want to believe that from wherever you come from wherever you are connecting from, whether you are currently in Africa, you are in Europe, I want to believe that you observe climate change in one way or the other. So climate change is real and affects each and everyone. It affects everybody. I've been talking about mitigation and adaptation. So these two are all needed. Mitigation is a preventive measure, and adaptation is what? is more or less a curative. So when adaptation happens, when you have accepted that, oh, whether we like it or not, climate change is going to happen anyway. So what can I do to still be able to adapt to it so that when it rains, my house will not be flooded? People are building at places where they are not supposed to be building. People are building at places that are waterlogged. People go and then buy lands in the dry season. In the dry season, they don't see the nature of the place. But when the rains come, that is where they see the power of what? Nature. So mitigation and adaptation are both what? Needed. So as African students, you have a big role to play in building a sustainable future. So my final thought will be that we do not inherit the earth from our ancestors. We borrow it from what? Our children. So it is very important that we protect the environment. It's very important that if right now the environment is becoming warmer, and warmer, then you can, and then I showed you a graph at the beginning. You see that over time, from the 1900s up to 2023, you see that there was an upward trend of temperature. That means that uh, the environment is becoming warmer and warmer, and what we can only do is to work towards, reducing the temperature. We experience heavy rains these days. We need to find a way of, you know, uh, embarking on some or using some mitigation measures, some mitigation and adaptation measures. So thank you very much from wherever you connected from all the participating universities. I must say I'm very happy, I'm privileged to have led today's session of our guest lecture. Maybe if you have a question, if you have a contribution, this is the time to ask. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Does anyone have a question or a contribution before we end the session? From the chat, I've not seen any question. Oh yeah, Jessica, you have a question. You can unmute. Yes, Jessica, then Samuel, then Oscar. Feel free to unmute.
Hello. Please, mine is a contribution. Prof, please, you made mention of the energy when you were talking about Ghana reusing, like reproducing basically from hydroelectric sources, and then as a matter of fact, we should try and conserve energy so that we would not force them to produce more and then emit more to the environment. So I am contributing to that fact that in Ghana here, though we basically produce from hydroelectric sources, as in we have the Akosombo, we have the Bui Power Station, we have the Pond and others. But then I am an electrical engineering student though. But then hydroelectric sources are basically eco-friendly in such a way that in the course of production, they emit less. But in Ghana, our energy sector produces like a lot of emission due to the thermal stations that we have. So the thermal stations in Ghana, like the Kapa, Sonon Asogli, Aomaso Thermal Station and others, they are the largest like emitters of GHG gases. So that is the contribution. The thermal stations emit more than the hydroelectric stations. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Any other contribution or a question?
Samuel, Samuel Afrifa.
Okay, thank you very much for this opportunity. My name is Samuel Frifa from KNUST. And then the question I have is, as a student, I would like to contribute to combating this adverse effects of climate change in my school. But I would like to know if CESDA will provide maybe additional support either in finances and in personnel and capacity so that I can mobilize students on KUC campus as a club to come up with initiatives which will help reduce the effects of climate change. Thank you.
All right, that is good. So as I was talking about from in your university, in your local university, you can find a way of, if currently there's a club, there's a climate change club over there, you can contribute by joining them. If you don't have any such club, then you can also think about maybe being the initiator, starting something like that. You bring people together, and then you think critically about the environment. You try to think about and observe some of the things that you think are as a result of the adverse effects of climate change. How you as a group can team up and then be able to provide solutions to that.
Okay, I see a question from Joyce from University of Ghana. Good afternoon, sir. Please, what of the missile bombing, will it contribute to the climate change over time? I think she's talking about the current war that's ongoing.
Please come again. Was it a question?
Yeah, she's asking, what of the missile bombing going on, will it contribute to climate change over time? The war that's ongoing between Iran and Israel. Yeah.
Yes, of course. And this is one of the reasons why, we are saying that Africa here, there's some kind of a climate injustice in our part of the world because we contribute less to climate change. And you see, America and the developed countries, these missiles that they use also produce some of these gases into the atmosphere. And if the war continues, and then we need so many guns, if the war continues, that means America, Iran, Israel, Lebanon, or any of the countries that is participating in this. That means they will need many guns. And once they need many guns, the question is, where are these guns produced? They are produced in factories. Is that okay? And these factories use petrol. They use diesel that are that come from fossil fuel sources. So yes, it's contributing greatly to climate change.
Yeah, I guess you answered all the questions. Samuel, do you have any other contribution on, should we wind up?
Yes, I have one last question. My question is, it's obvious that in the near future, Africa will start using AI in most of our things that we do, or either we are using it already. So my question is, research shows that AI consumes a lot of energy. So if you are saying AI is the future, then that means we're going to produce a lot of energy to able to supply the data centers with this energy so that they can process whatever we are using the AI for. So my question is, isn't that going to contribute a lot to this climate change? And is there a way we can have alternate ways of producing energy except solar energy so that we can supply these data centers with this clean green energy?
You are talking about, please come again.
My question is, it is obvious that in the near future, Africa is going to adopt AI in most of our activities that we do. And then research also shows that AI data centers consumes a lot of energy. It even shows that it's more energy than the whole state of California combined. So my question is, if Africa is going to adopt the use of AI, then we are going to need to produce more energy. And Doc, since you have been saying that the production of energy, the burning of fossil fuels and the rest also contribute highly to climate change, what is the way forward? what is the way forward for Africa for us to produce green energy, which will limit the contribution factor to climate change?
So that is basically what we are all preaching now, that we should resort to using the mitigation measures. That means that at the end of the day, we are going to increase our energy consumption. So once we are increasing our energy consumption, then we know that this energy is coming from the fossil source. Then we have to work towards moving away from the fossil source. Is that not it? And one way is by using the solar, by using the turbines, by using the bioenergy. I hope that is fine. So that is what we can do. That is what I think we can do. The AI is only if what you said, I haven't read it anywhere, but if what you said is anything to go by, then it means that our energy consumption is going to go up. And that is why it is important we resort to using renewable energy sources vis-a-vis the fossil fuel sources that contribute greatly to greenhouse gas emissions.
Okay, interesting questions. But the time is not on our side. Maybe we can continue with the discussion on the WhatsApp group. Yeah, our facilitators are also in the WhatsApp group. Yeah, let's continue to engage and interact. Yeah, thank you, Prof. Camillus Wongnaa, for the insightful and thought-provoking lecture. We truly appreciate your time and valuable contribution to the Acclimatized course. Thank you as well to the students for your active participation and engagement. Look forward to continuing this important conversation in the coming session. Have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you too. Bye-bye.